You know, I was driving down a country road at first inning in the morning last week. Most people were still wrapped in their blankets, dreaming their dreams. But there he was, old Mr. Peterson, working his fields. Just a single light from his tractor piercing through the darkness, moving slowly, methodically across hundreds of acres. Nobody there to see him. Nobody there to praise him. Just him, his work, and the stars above. I pulled over and watched for a while, and something profound hit me. That light moving across the field, that's the story of every great achievement in history. The work that happens before the sun rises, before the audience arrives, before anyone's there to give out medals or take pictures. Some people asked me once, why does Mr. Peterson start so early? Why not wait for daylight? I will tell you why. Because he understands something that took me years to learn. Success isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows, in those quiet moments when the only person watching is yourself. You see, there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who work hard when everyone's watching, that's easy. But then there are those rare few who maintain their standards, even when no one would know the difference. That farmer, he's not out there at 4. 30 in the morning because someone's checking his time card. He's out there because of something deeper. Now here's what fascinates me about integrity. The word itself comes from mathematics. A whole number, complete, undivided. You're either a person of integrity or you're not. There's no such thing as partial integrity. It's like being pregnant. You either are or you aren't. I remember when I was young, my grandfather told me something I'll never forget. He said, the true test of a person's character isn't what they do when everyone's watching. It's what they do when nobody would ever know. Think about that for a moment. What do you do when nobody's watching? The greatest achievements in history were built on countless unseen hours. The champion doesn't become a champion in the ring. That's just where they collect the trophy. They become a champion at 5 a.m. in an empty gym, when their friends are sleeping, when there's no crowd, no cameras, no applause. But here's what's interesting, and pay close attention to this. What you do in private will always show up in public. You can't work like an amateur in private and perform like a professional in public. Life doesn't work that way. The farmer who cuts corners when planting in spring can't expect a miracle harvest in fall. Every day, we're all planting seeds. Every private decision, every moment when we think nobody's looking, we're planting seeds. And the harvest? Oh, the harvest always comes. Nature operates in absolute laws. You can't plant corn and expect to harvest wheat. You can't plant laziness and expect to harvest excellence. And that brings us to where you are right now. In this moment, what seeds are you planting when nobody's looking? What kind of harvest are you preparing for? Because I promise you this, someone is always watching. You are. And ultimately, that's the only audience that truly matters. Your life, your success, your future, they're all built in those private moments, those early morning hours, those extra repetitions when everyone else has gone home. Just like that farmer in his field, moving through the darkness, preparing the soil for something magnificent. And you know what? That's just the beginning of what we need to understand about this journey, because there's something even more powerful at work here, something I call the hidden power of private victories. You know what's fascinating about those private victories? They're like the roots of a mighty oak tree. Nobody sees them, nobody photographs them, nobody writes news stories about them. But without those roots growing deep and strong beneath the surface, that tree wouldn't stand a chance against the storms that come. Let me share something with you that changed my life. Years ago, I met an Olympic athlete. Let's call her Sarah. Everyone saw her gold medal moment, those 60 seconds of glory. But what they didn't see were the 15 years before that moment. They didn't see her practicing her routine at 4, when the gym was cold and empty. They didn't see her icing her knees every night. They didn't see her eating plain chicken and broccoli while her friends were enjoying pizza and ice cream. That's what I call the iceberg of success. People see the tip, the medal, the achievement, the moment triumph. But beneath the surface, that's where the real mass lies. That's where champions are truly made. Now, here's something profound about these private disciplines. They have a peculiar way of showing up in public. You can't hide private laziness behind public effort forever, just like you can't hide private diligence behind public modesty forever. Everything we do in private eventually finds its way to the surface. I knew a man who built a successful business from nothing. People would look at him and say, wow, he's an overnight success. Overnight. Let me tell you about his overnight success. For 3 years, he worked his regular job during the day and built his dream at night. While others watched TV, he studied his industry. While others slept in on weekends, he was testing his products. While others complained about their circumstances, he was quietly changing his. Success doesn't come from one grand, heroic action. It comes from the compound effect of small, consistent, private disciplines repeated every single day. It's like putting a penny in a jar. 1 penny? Not much. But what if you doubled it every day for 30 days? By day 30, that penny becomes a fortune. That's how private victories work. Each small victory, each private moment of choosing discipline over comfort, they're all pennies in your jar of success, and they compound. Oh, how they compound? Every time you choose to do the right thing when nobody's watching, you're not just performing an action. You're building something far more valuable. You're building your character. You're building your future. You're building what I call your success account. Here's what most people don't understand about success. It's not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's more like compound interest. Every private victory, every small discipline adds interest to your account. And just like compound interest, the real magic happens over time. I remember talking to a master craftsman once. He told me something I'll never forget. He said the difference between a good piece and a masterpiece isn't in what people can see. It's in all the little details they can't see. He would spend hours perfecting parts of his furniture that would be hidden beneath cushions or against walls. Why? Because he knew that true excellence isn't about what's visible, it's about being excellent even in the places nobody will ever look. And that's really what we're talking about here. The hidden power of being excellent when excellence isn't required, of doing more than you have to when you could get by with less, of being disciplined when no one would know if you weren't. Because here's the truth, and this is important. You might be able to fool others, but you can never fool yourself. Every time you choose the easy way when nobody's watching, a little piece of your self-respect dissolves. But every time you choose the right way, the hard way, the excellent way, when nobody's watching, that's when you build something powerful within yourself. And that power, that inner strength, it becomes the foundation of everything else in your life. It becomes the bedrock upon which you can build anything. Because once you master yourself in private, public success becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And speaking of mastery, there are 4 essential pillars that support this journey to excellence. 4 fundamental principles that, when understood and applied, can transform your private moments into public triumphs. When I think about these 4 pillars, I'm reminded of something I observed in an old cathedral. You see, those massive stone pillars weren't just for show. They held the entire structure together. Remove even one, and that's exactly how these 4 pillars of silent excellence work in our lives. Self-accountability first. You know, it's interesting, everybody wants to be successful, but few people are willing to be accountable to themselves. I was visiting a friend's farm recently, and he showed me his record books. Every single day, for 30 years, he'd written down what he'd accomplished. Not for his boss, not for his banker, but for himself. When I asked him why, he said something profane. Because at the end of each day, I have to look myself in the mirror, and I need to know I did what I said I would do. That's self-accountability. It's not about having someone standing over your shoulder. It's about standing over your own shoulder. It's about making a commitment to yourself and treating it with the same respect. No, with more respect than a commitment you'd make to someone else. Your standards aren't what you want, wish for, or hope to do. Your standards are what you will not live without. They're your non-negotiables. Think about this. Have you ever noticed how some people's work is excellent even when they think nobody will see it? While others do just enough to get by, even when people are watching. I once knew a janitor at a school. Every Friday, he would move every single desk to mop underneath. Someone asked him why he went to such trouble when nobody would notice. His response, first, I would notice. Second, those kids deserve to start each week in a completely clean classroom. That's what I call personal standards. They're not about recognition. They're about who you decide to be. The third pillar is inner discipline. Now, this is where most people get it wrong. They think discipline is about forcing yourself to do something you hate. But true discipline is about something much deeper. It's about choosing what you want most over what you want now. Every morning, you have two voices in your head. One says, stay in bed, it's comfortable here. The other says, get up, you have work to do. Inner discipline is about which voice you listen to. Not just once, not just when you feel like it, but every single time. I remember meeting a successful businessman who told me he hadn't missed his 5 a.m. workout in 20 years. Not because he always felt like going, but because he had decided that's who he was going to be. Rain or shine, tired or energetic, motivated or not, he showed up. That's inner discipline. And that brings us to the fourth pillar, character development. This is perhaps the most important of all, because while skills can be learned and habits can be formed, character is who you are when everything else is stripped away. You see, character isn't built in the big moments. It's built in all the small decisions you make when you think nobody's paying attention. It's built in those moments when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when it would be so easy to take a shortcut, but you don't. I once heard a story about a builder who was asked to build one last house before his retirement. Thinking nobody would know, he cut corners, used inferior materials. When he finished, his boss handed him the keys and said, "This is our gift to you for your years of service." Imagine living in a house where you know exactly where all the corners were cut. That's what life is like when you compromise your character. But here's what's beautiful about character development. It works the other way too. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, excellence over mediocrity, long-term growth over short-term comfort, you're building something. You're building a foundation that will support anything you want to achieve in life. These 4 pillars, self-accountability, personal standards, inner discipline, and character development, they work together. Each one strengthens the others. When you're accountable to yourself, your standards naturally rise. When your standards rise, you need more discipline to meet them. And as you exercise that discipline, your character grows stronger. And here's what's fascinating. When these pillars are strong, something remarkable happens. Success becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Because success isn't just about what you do. It's about who you become in the process. But let me tell you something important. Building these pillars isn't free. There's a price to be paid for excellence, for achievement, for becoming the person you're capable of being. And that price is what we need to talk about next. You know what's interesting about success? Everybody wants to be successful, but very few people want to pay the price. They want the harvest, but they're not willing to plant the seeds. They want the gold medal, but they're not willing to train when it's cold and dark outside. Let me tell you a story that changed my perspective forever. I met a man who built the most successful restaurant in his city. Beautiful place, always packed. One day, I asked him about the secret to his success. He pulled out an old, worn notebook. Inside were thousands of recipes, tested, refined, adjusted. He had spent 3 years testing recipes in his garage before he ever served a single customer. 3 years. While others were rushing to open their doors, he was perfecting his craft. That's what I call true commitment. It's not just saying yes to your goals, it's understanding and accepting all the no's that come with that. Yes? When you say yes to excellence, you're automatically saying no to mediocrity. When you say yes to long-term success, you're saying no to short-term comfort. Something that's destroying more dreams than failure ever did. The temptation to cut corners. Cutting corners is like taking out a loan from your future success with a terrible interest rate. Sure, it might make things easier today, but eventually that loan comes due. And when it does, it demands payment with interest. I once knew a builder who saved a few $1,000s using cheaper materials on a foundation. 2 years later, the repair bill was 10 times what he'd saved. But here's what's tragic. It wasn't just the money. It was his reputation. It was the trust people had in him. You can't put a price tag on trust, but once it's gone, the cost is enormous. And that brings us to something crucial, the long-term consequences of short-term choices. Every choice you make today is like planting a seed. Some seeds take years to grow. That's why people make bad choices. They don't see the sprout the next day, so they think it doesn't matter. Every time you choose the easy way instead of the right way, you're not just making a single decision. You're starting a chain reaction. You're programming your subconscious mind to believe that cutting corners is acceptable. And once that programming takes hold, it affects everything. I remember talking to a young athlete who decided to skip his morning workouts for just 1 week. Just 1 week, he said. No big deal, right? But here's what happened. That 1 week turned into 2, then a month. By the time his competition came around, he'd lost more than just training time. He'd lost his edge, his confidence, his momentum. The price of greatness isn't just in the big decisions. It's in all those small moments when you think it doesn't matter. But it does matter. Everything matters. Every workout you skip, every shortcut you take, every time you choose good enough over excellent, it all matters. The price of greatness is paid in full, and it's paid in advance. You don't get to negotiate with this price. You don't get to pay half now and half later. You pay in full with your time, with your effort, with your discipline, with your commitment. While the price of greatness is high, the price of mediocrity is even higher. The price of greatness you pay once, and it makes you stronger. The price of mediocrity you pay every day, and it makes you weaker. And just like seasons in nature, there are seasons in our journey toward greatness. Times of planting and times of harvest, times of growth and times of apparent stillness. Understanding these seasons, that's what separates those who succeed from those who give up too soon. You know what most people don't understand about success? It follows the same laws as nature. You can't plant a seed today and harvest tomorrow. You can't rush the seasons. But more importantly, you can't skip them either. I learned this lesson in the most profound way from an old apple farmer. One winter day, I saw him out in his orchard pruning his trees in the bitter cold. People thought he was crazy, standing out there cutting away perfectly good branches when nothing was growing. But he understood something they didn't. He knew that what you do in the winter determines your harvest in the fall. See, we all face winter seasons in our lives. Times when it feels like nothing is happening, when all our hard work seems to disappear into frozen ground. Times when everyone else seems to be harvesting while we're still waiting for our first sprout. During these winter seasons, most people quit. They look at the frozen ground and think, what's the use? But winners, they understand that winter isn't a time for quitting, it's a time for preparation. It's a time for developing roots that go deep enough to sustain the growth that's coming. I remember asking that farmer, how do you stay motivated when you can't see any results? He smiled and said something I'll never forget. He said, son, the biggest mistake people make is waiting to see the harvest before they believe in their work. By then it's too late to plant. That's the secret of the winter seasons. You have to believe in what you can't yet see. You have to trust in the laws of sowing and reaping because they are laws, not suggestions, not guidelines, but absolute laws. And speaking of the law of sowing and reaping, let me tell you something powerful about this law. You don't get what you want. You get what you plant. And you don't get what you plant. You get what you plant multiplied. Plant an apple seed, you don't get an apple. You get an apple tree that produces thousands of apples. Plant a negative attitude, you don't just get a bad day. You get a life that multiplies that negativity. Plant discipline, you don't just get one victory. You get a character that creates endless victory. But here's what's fascinating about the harvest. It never comes when you're watching for it. It's like watching a pot of water boil or waiting for paint to dry. The moment you stop obsessing over it, that's when you look up and realize growth has been happening all along. I knew a woman spent 7 years building her business. People called her an overnight success. 7 years of overnight, but she understood the seasons. She knew that every client meeting, every late night, every setback was part of her growing season. She was planting seeds every single day, even when the ground looked barren. And that's really what we're talking about here. Understanding that every season serves a purpose. Winter isn't just about cold and darkness. It's about preparation. Spring isn't just about planting, it's about believing. Summer isn't just about growing. It's about enduring. And fall is about harvesting what you've had the courage to plant and the patience to nurture. But none of these seasons mean anything unless you've developed something else, unless you've built your own personal philosophy about success and achievement. Because without that foundation, your personal philosophy is like the rudder of a ship. It might be small compared to the whole vessel, but it determines your entire direction. And here's what's fascinating. Everyone has a philosophy. The only question is, did you choose it, or did you just absorb whatever came your way? I remember sitting with an old woodworker in his shop. Watching him work was like watching a dance. Every movement had purpose. Every action reflected decades of refined thinking. I asked him about his incredible work ethic. He put down his tools, looked at me and said, I learned early on that the work I do when I'm alone shapes the reputation I have when I'm not. That's what a personal philosophy does. It guides you when nobody's giving you directions. It keeps you steady when the winds of opinion and convenience try to blow you off course. But here's the key. You don't get it by accident. You build it piece by piece, day by day. Let me tell you what I mean. Your work ethic isn't just about working hard. It's about working hard because of who you've decided to be. It's not about what your boss thinks or what your coworkers do. It's about the standards you've set for yourself. I knew a young man who cleaned offices at night to pay for his education. Nobody saw him work. Nobody knew if he did a good job or not. But every night he cleaned those offices like he owned the building. Why? Because he understood something profound. He wasn't just cleaning offices, he was building his character. And that's where unshakable habits come in. Habits are like cables. You weave them every day, one small action at a time. You can't see them getting stronger, but one day you realize they're either lifting you up or holding you down. The most successful people I've ever met, they don't leave their habits to chance. They design them. They build them intentionally. They understand that what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. Every morning when you wake up, you're either strengthening the habit of discipline or the habit of convenience. Every time you face a challenge, you're either building the habit of persistence or the habit of giving up. There's no neutral ground here. But habits without reflection, that's like having a powerful car with no steering wheel. That's where personal reflection comes in. Every evening, I spend a few quiet minutes asking myself 3 questions. What did I learn today? What did I do well? What could I have done better? I learned this from a mentor who built an empire from nothing. He told me most people experience life once, when it happens. But when you reflect, You experience it twice, and the second time is when you extract the wisdom. Your personal philosophy isn't just about what you do. It's about who you're becoming. Every time you choose excellence over convenience, every time you keep going when it would be easier to quit, every time you do the right thing when nobody's watching, you're not just performing actions, you're shaping your character. Once you build this philosophy, once you establish these habits, once you develop this practice of reflection, something remarkable happens. Your private excellence begins to show up in the marketplace of life. The marketplace of life is fascinating. It's the only marketplace where everything counts, but you never know what's being counted. You never know which small act of integrity, which moment of excellence, which decision made in private will suddenly show up in public. I was talking to a business owner recently. He told me something remarkable. He said, I never have to check if my best employee is doing their job. You know why? Because 20 years ago, when they were 16, they were sweeping floors at their first job. And they swept those floors like they owned the building. That's who they are. It's not what they do. It's who they are. The marketplace keeps what I call an invisible scorecard. It's recording everything. Not just the big things, but all those tiny moments you think nobody notices. The way you handle small responsibilities. The way you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. The quality of your work when nobody's checking. Let me tell you about two builders. Both built houses they thought nobody would examine closely. One cut corners, figuring nobody would look behind the walls. The other built every hidden detail with excellence. 10 years later, guess what happened? A major storm hit their area. One house stood firm. The other revealed every shortcut, every compromise, every moment of choosing convenience over quality. That's how the marketplace works. You never know when the storm will come that reveals who you really are. But here's what's fascinating about reputation. You don't build it in a day, and you don't build it when you need it. You build it little by little, decision by decision, moment by moment. It's like making deposits in a bank account. Every time you choose excellence, you make a deposit. Every time you choose mediocrity, you make a withdrawal. I remember asking a highly successful person about their reputation for excellence. They smiled and said, "You know what's interesting? I never set out to build a reputation. I just decided early on that I would do everything as well as I could." The reputation, that took care of itself. See, that's the secret of the marketplace. It doesn't just measure what you do, it measures who you are. And who you are is revealed in all those private moments when you think nobody's watching. The marketplace has a way of finding out what you do in private and shouting it from the rooftops. Every time you do something, you're not just doing that thing. You're practicing being a certain kind of person. When you do excellent work in private, you're practicing being an excellent person. When you take shortcuts, you're practicing being the kind of person who takes shortcuts. What's beautiful about excellence? It can't be faked. You can fool people once, maybe twice, but you can't fool the marketplace forever. Eventually, who you really are will shine through. That's why true excellence isn't about looking good. It's about being good. It's not about appearing valuable. It's about providing value. The marketplace always knows. It might not show you that it knows right away, but it knows. And one day, when the right opportunity comes, when the right door opens, when the right moment arrives, everything you've been in private suddenly becomes visible to everyone. And so we arrive at this moment, the moment of decision, not just about what you've heard, but about who you're going to be when you walk out of here today. Because information without action is just entertainment. Here's what I want you to do tomorrow morning. When that alarm goes off, don't just start your day, start your legacy. Start building something remarkable in those quiet hours when nobody's watching. Remember that farmer in his field before sunrise? Be that farmer in your own life. Take out a piece of paper tonight. Write down 3 areas of your life where you've been accepting good enough when excellence was possible. Maybe it's in your work, your relationships, your personal growth. Don't write down what you're going to do. Write down who you're going to be. Because who you're going to be will determine what you're going to do. And what you do consistently in private will absolutely determine what you achieve in public. I challenge you to spend the next 30 days living as if everything you do in private will eventually become public. Because, my friends, it will. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but the marketplace of life has a way of revealing everything. Start small, but start today. Choose one area where you'll practice excellence when nobody's watching. Make your bed like you're in a 5-star hotel. Write that report like it's going to be published. Treat every person you meet like they're the most important client you'll ever have. Remember this, excellence is never an accident. It's always a choice made again and again in those quiet moments when it would be so easy to do less. But those choices, they're building something. They're building you. Years from now, people won't remember what you said. They might not even remember what you did. But they will never forget who you were. And who you were is being shaped right now. In all those private moments, in all those unseen hours. So let me ask you one final question. When no one is watching, who are you? Because that person, that's who you really are. And that person is who you'll ultimately become in public. The choice is yours. The time is now. And remember, somewhere out there in a field before sunrise, that farmer is still working. The only question is, will you join him in the ranks of those who choose excellence, even when no one's watching? Your future is waiting. But more importantly, your character is waiting. What will you choose to build in those quiet moments that shape everything? Thank you. And remember, excellence in private becomes excellence in public. Always has been, always will be. Now go build something remarkable, starting with yourself,